So I'd love to jump right in. I'm actually going to start with you, Jay. I'm going to put you on the spot because you have a really interesting career path. And I think most of the people who are gathered tonight are really thinking about how they're going to get their career started and what that could look like amid so much uncertainty. And so I'd love for you to share a little bit about the sort of winding road that you've taken.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me today. And it's good to see some old friends here and happy to be here. So, well, interestingly enough, I grew up on the East Coast, grew up in Boston, went to school at Syracuse, and I'm dating myself now, unfortunately, but my journey into animation was one of a touch of naivety, a little bit of luck, and some good old plain old-fashioned ignorance. Back in the mid '80s, I came out to LA with not an interest at all in animation. In fact, it hadn't even crossed my mind. It was more an idea of like, I just want a job in the entertainment industry. And went to LA with the idea of like, well, that's where the entertainment jobs are. And I didn't go out wanting to be a director or producer or writer. I just figured, let me go out and let the journey take me wherever it was going to take me. So I referenced the sort of luck and the naivety and a little bit of the ignorance from the standpoint that I had never been to LA before and I didn't know anyone in LA. And I thought, oh, well, it's a major city. I'm sure there's public transportation throughout and I won't need a car and I can just, and that didn't really happen. Back in mid '80s, for those of my age group and whatnot, there was no uploading your resume to an internet, job site or a cell phone with GPS or Uber or any of that stuff. So you had to come packing with your briefcase, resumes, address books, and maps. And I mean real maps to get around. So I'll never forget, I was in Hollywood. I took a bus over from Hollywood to a place called Studio City because I thought, well, there must be a lot of studios if they're going to call it Studio City. So away I went. And in summer of 1984, if you took a bus over from Hollywood into the San Fernando Valley, the first entertainment company you would have seen was the old Hanna-Barbera studios. And that's when the light bulb went off over my head. I just said, well, I don't know how they make cartoons. I don't know anything about it. But what I do know is that these folks have more on television than anybody else I'm going to be giving my resume to. So got off the bus and I just knew, because I had my three-piece suit on, because I just knew I was going to be getting an interview wherever I went. I walked in and the receptionist, who will never know how she changed the course of my life, said, oh, no, we're not hiring, but two companies are always hiring. And she gave me the addresses of these two small independent animation companies, one of which I couldn't find. The other, I had the address for and walked further down the street. And it happened to be in Studio City of all places. And it was a company called Deke. And back in the day, Deke did shows like Inspector Gadget and Dennis the Menace and shows like that some of you weren't even born when these things were coming on. But I actually ended up getting a production assistant job there. And I remember even saying then, oh, I'll just do this until I get a real entertainment job. And I never left the industry. I've worked at different studios and I've worked in different jobs. But two things kept me into the animation industry. Number one, I became passionate about the art form. It was just so amazing to me. And number two, it was the people. The people working there are so passionate about what they do, so skilled. But I think the biggest thing that I found about the people in this industry is they don't take themselves too seriously. Yes, they're intense about their work and proud of the work they do. But they make cartoons, and from that standpoint, they have a lot of fun. And I've found that to be the case throughout my journey at the different studios, whether it's in primetime animation or the kids space, and just moved up the ladder as I went from studio to studio. Ventured into recruiting, ventured into development, ventured into current series, and somehow ended up at Disney, and here I am today.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. So now, Christina, you are a fairly recent grad, right? And you're working at Pixar, which is very exciting. So we'd love to hear how you landed that job.
Oh, yeah, I know. I just graduated in 2016 from the School of Visual Arts in New York City, a school that I love and changed my whole entire life. So I'm very thankful for them. But my journey was definitely a little crazy. For those who don't know, I am from Brooklyn, New York, born and raised, which I'm very proud of. Brooklyn, which is why I love New York. I was so happy I got asked to do this. But yeah, my career path was definitely a wild one. I was an art major in high school. I was like 15. I knew kind of then as I started painting, I was doing a lot of photography. I was like, wow, I love this so much. And this kind of kickstarted like my creativity. And like, I was just like wild about art. I had no everything, drawing, painting, just nonstop. But it was kind of then that I realized I was like, okay, so this little thing that I had inside of me that always wanted to like, I've watched Pixar films since the beginning of time. I loved playing video games. I was such a video game junkie. And as time went on, and I was like painting and doing all these 2D forms of art, I was like, you know what? I have to be true to myself. I really want to see how I can get into this world of animation. So I asked my art teacher, I was like, listen, I know this is crazy, but I really want to do 3D artwork. I want to learn on the computer. And growing up, I didn't even have a computer. So I was working 3 jobs. He was like, you know what?
Wow.
Go and look. I was crazy. I had a long life of working. So I've been working since I was 15. So I remember like he was like, go and look up the School of Visual Arts and see if they have a course, besides just like the regular college course, something for pre-college people so you can try it. See if you like it, see if this works for you. It is a very complicated major and field of work, as we know. So it's like, okay. So I went to, the school library that day. I looked it up and I found a computer animation course. I was like, oh my God, this is it. But then I saw the price tag and I was like, okay. So I saved up all my money. So I worked a lot. It's so funny. I worked at a gym and a bakery on the same block, two different corners, and that was very funny. But I saved up all my money and I ended up putting myself through the pre-college course at the School of Visual Arts. And so it was a 3-week course, very short and simple. But the first day, I was hooked. You couldn't pull me away from the computer. I remember I was there like so late every night, and like, people were coming in and being like, are you a thesis major? And I was like, no, I literally don't even go here yet. I was like, I don't even go here yet. I just love it so much already. So as time went on, went back to school as my senior year, I only applied to School of Visual Arts. Someone just said this. It was in like the little intro. It said, those who had a plan B never did their plan A. I really never had a plan B. Like I always put all my eggs in one basket. I knew I wanted to go to that school and it ended up being like the best decision. Because we're in New York City, it's a great place for companies from the West Coast, the East Coast, the South to all come. They want to come to New York City. They want to find artists. They want to find people. It's a great mecca for it. So ended up Pixar was coming on a recruiting trip. I met the recruiters, followed up with them. They were really adamant about the internship. So I ultimately got a summer internship, which after my senior year led to a full-time position.
Wow, that's
Yeah.
great. I love your story. Like I can relate as someone who also didn't grow up with a computer and like had to work several jobs. I appreciate your
Yeah.
hustle, right? And I
Yeah.
appreciate
Thank you.
your being so proactive and like making it happen. That's great.
Yeah.
Camille. Now you are on the other side of the table. You are someone everyone wants to hear from. Could you talk to us a little bit about what you do at Nickelodeon and what students should be thinking about while they're still in school to better prepare them for a role like one that might be offered there?
My pleasure. First of all, hi, everybody. Nice to be here. My role at Nickelodeon is I am VP of Recruitment, Talent Development, and Outreach. And what that means is I am managing a team. I'm putting together a team. We go out and we look for entry-level talent. So I have the director on my team who oversees our intern program. And, we work with the different schools, both in California and all across the country, looking for animation talent, looking for that next generation of talent. We look at portfolios and we look at resumes, we look at reels, just trying to keep an eye on who's out there, and then what schools have different programs to source from. And then the other part of my job is looking for pro talent, so people who are already out there in the industry, who have been working for several years in the different disciplines across animation. And the really cool thing about Nickelodeon right now is that we're hiring pretty much for everything. We've got current series, we've got shorts, we've got preschool, we're bringing back movies, and we also hire on the East Coast and the West Coast. So it's really, really great to bring both parts of the company together and all of the areas that are looking for talent. And I also think it was mentioned in the video, like looking beyond just animation. There are so many different roles that support animation. There's administration, there's technology. Like animation is just it's a huge place to work in right now, just because it spreads off not just the people who are doing the animating, but all of the departments along the pipeline and all of the departments that support the studios and the different disciplines. There's just a lot of opportunity out there for people who are interested in animation.
That's awesome. So you brought up portfolios, and so I'm going to give a follow-up along those lines. What do you look for in a portfolio?
A really good question. And I would say what we look for in a portfolio is really going to depend on the show or the project that we're hiring for and the studio. If I'm looking at a portfolio and I'm hiring for a board artist for SpongeBob, I'm going to be looking for qualities for that show. So lots of comedy, lots of, funny moments, lots of characters that are kind of what we call squash and stretch. So there's a lot of movement in the characters, good storytelling. If I'm looking for a show that is a preschool show, then I'm going to be looking for someone who can work with early development type shows. And the movements might be a little bit more simpler because it's a preschool show, right? So I don't need all of the squash and stretch. So what I'm basically saying is, regardless of whether you've got a portfolio, a resume, or a reel, make sure that you're tailoring your work to the company and to the job. You might have to have a couple of different examples, or you might want to create a website where you can put your different, if you do multiple disciplines, make a website. But we want to see that you've done the homework and the research to know about our company or Pixar or Disney TV, to know that to know where you're applying to.
Yes, always good advice. Nowhere, and I've never heard squash and stretch. That's really, I'll never forget that though.
It's fun. Squash and stretch is fun.
Now, Jay, I know you also see a lot of submissions. So I want to ask you a similar question. When you're reading scripts for animated series or looking at story ideas, what do you look for? What catches your eye?
So yeah, so my focus is more on writers, to be frank. We have our, similar to Camille, we have our own art and animation recruitment team that travels in the same area she does. They're probably bumping into each other as they sort of travel along the different events. For me, when I expanded my role a couple of years ago, it sort of allowed me to sort of start to really dig into where our next generation of writers were going to come from. And what was really interesting to me was that we didn't get a lot of samples from students at high profile screenwriting programs. And I went on a journey to find out why. And, lo and behold, and asking the question to not only students, but faculty as well, I got a lot of, oh, well, I thought you needed to know how to draw. Oh, I thought you needed to know how you put together an animated show because that will inform your writing. Oh, I didn't have an animation sample. I didn't know who to send it to. There were all these different obstacles and what have you. And so then I recognized, like, well, no wonder I didn't get anything from any of these folks. So I made that my mission to sort of change that perspective. And part of it comes down to the fact that when we're reading, that I'm specifically reading for a potential writers, I'm looking at character. I'm looking at character development. I'm looking at character depth and dimensionality. So the truth of the matter is, when you're hiring somebody to write animation, especially in the kids programming world, depending on if it's a junior, Disney Junior show or more the 6 to 11 demo for Disney Channel, there's going to have to be adjustments you make as a writer to relate to that audience. But that being said, the challenge and the hardest part of any sort of writing is really crafting characters that are relatable, that that an audience connects with. So the reality is, when I'm reading a script, first of all, a live action script that is maybe geared to an 18 to 35-year-old audience, I'm looking at that script the same way I'd look at a script in the animation world, because my focus is in on the character, and I'm asking myself basic questions. I'm asking them, what is this character's point of view? Why do I like this character? And why would I follow this character? Who is this character? Not just what does this character do or what does this character say, but who really is the character? Because that's ultimately, asking these questions is sort of delving into the type of shows that we do. And taking directly from what Camille said, know who you're sending your material to. If you're sending anything to, whether it's on the art side or writing sample side, to Disney TV animation, know what our shows are. There are a lot of shows that Nickelodeon have that I love, but don't fit our brand. So from that standpoint, you have to know the type of shows that we're looking for. From a Disney perspective, obviously, it's comedy with heart. There's a sincerity. So I'm looking for characters that obviously relatable and what have you. And when I sort of reference the likable aspect of it, it doesn't mean the characters aren't flawed. It doesn't mean they're not making poor choices. It's basically characters on a journey, and everything is sort of character driven when you look at all of our shows. So while, Gravity Falls is much different from an Amphibia, and Big City Greens and Phineas and Ferb are not the same, there is that consistent aspect to it. And that is sort of following the journey of these characters that you can relate and connect with. So so that's really what we're looking for when we're looking for either our apprentice writers for our apprentice writer program or staff writers for our shows.
Awesome, thank you. Speaking of relating and connecting, Christina, we've all moved to a remote context, right? Which means creative teams are collaborating in this new context. Can you talk to us a little bit about what that adjustment has looked like? How are you managing to stay in production, and how are you making things with your team?
Yeah, so just like this, we use Zoom a lot. Zoom has been one of the most amazing tools and programs that we've been able to use. Working at Pixar, we're super collaborative. There are meetings going on all day long. So it's always fun to run around, you bump into people. Even the building itself is made to literally bump into your colleagues. Steve Jobs, when he created it, it was meant so that people always had to walk out to use the bathroom, go eat, get a drink of coffee in a very central hub, so that as you're on the walk, you might bump into somebody or be like, oh, I forgot to send you that email, or, oh, hey, I meant to talk to you about something. Or if you're thinking of something and you see someone hey, can you help me? It was very always super collaborative like that, very spontaneous as ideas come. So, it's so funny going on to a Zoom thing. Everything's definitely very hey, are you free? I see a time slot open very small, you have to jump into it. So it's not as organic, because everything's very planned. So it's definitely different for us. So
Okay.
yeah, so it's definitely funny, but we all started getting very used to it. And it actually it's really interesting, because then you kind of look around, and sometimes for me, my creative space was my work desk. And so it was nice to create something at home as well that felt the same as being at my desk at work. But we really just, communicate every day still in Zooms. it's almost like you're there. You know, you have the meeting in the morning to go over everything and then meetings throughout the day. It's definitely, you know, when you're talking over each other, it's definitely like, you know, you have to unmute and then sometimes like a lag or something, but it's almost the same, but we're just all in our own spaces, in our own houses. So we definitely make it work. Luckily, like it's so collaborative. The people are so amazing to work with that, you know, whether, you know, we're a mile away, 100 miles away, or in the same room, it almost feels the same. Of course, we all can't, you know, wait to get back and, you know, for everything go back to normal. But for now, I think that we're doing a great job of being collaborative online and making everything work.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Wonderful. So good to hear. Camille, still on the topic of, you know, having this new remote context, has this opened up opportunities for hiring in a global context? Are you able to take on team members from all over the world now because everything is so much easier remotely?
Yeah, I think, you know, when all of this started, nobody imagined, like, it was supposed to be for a couple of weeks, then maybe it was like a month, then it was like 2 months. And, you know, here we are, it's almost the end of the year. So, you know, what's amazed me is the fact that we were able to pivot and adapt so quickly. You know, I literally had just started at Nickelodeon. I started at the end of January, and I had about a month and a half in the studio, and you know, was in the process of building up a team. So we were able to pivot very quickly to continue hiring. I was really worried that we wouldn't be able to continue hiring at all, and we pivoted really quickly. Big, you know, shout out to the technology teams for making it possible. We have hired for pretty much all of our shows. Like, again, we did not stop. So I think the technology, and the fact that, you know, the IT teams were able to do this and arrange it so quickly, um, is amazing. And I think before, everyone said, you know, we always were told, oh, it's really hard to do a production remotely. We need people to be in the building to do it. We can't have the art department out or story. And we've proven that wrong, I think, across all three of our studios. Like, we're all working, we're all hiring, we're greenlighting projects. So I think the technology has enabled us to keep going, which is pretty amazing. And I think you know, a little bit like what Christina was saying is like, we have to communicate differently as well. You know, you know, it's kind of forcing us to be better communicators. Um, and then, as you know, as far as opportunities go, I think that it has opened up the possibility to be able to, you know, work so that we can hire for the East Coast, West Coast. Like, we don't have to fly out, or you know, you can do that from your bedroom or your living room. So I think that it's definitely opened up the opportunity to be able to, um, you know, work in these areas that we didn't think possible before. And I don't know, you know, we're all kind of waiting for that moment when we can come back together. But, you know, my personal thought is that it will be different. You know, I think it's allowed us to create bridges, internationally and across states. It's allowed us to work from home. It's allowed us to communicate differently and maybe more effectively. There, you know, I'm not going to lie, like the Zoom meetings, it's a lot, but it's a lot, you know, and I hope that we go back to, you know, some kind of normalcy in the schedules. But I hope it answers your question in that, yes, it's allowed us to, um, you know, work in roles that we didn't think we could before, and you know, create opportunities that we can bring in talent. You know, what that will be when we do go back, I don't know yet, but I think there will be some kinds of changes.
That's wonderful. Could you actually, I want to ask one more follow-up question. Because communication has shifted now that we're all on Zoom, does that shift the way you look at the skills that students highlight on their resumes in terms of being able to manage this kind of work style?
Honestly, from my point of view, not really, because I'm still going to go in. The first thing I want to see is like, did you look at the job description? Did you hit what I'm asking for, what the company's asking for on the job description? Do your skills match what we're looking for? Like, I was just looking at portfolios the other night, and I was like, it didn't change that part of my job at all. It's like, I want to know, if you're saying like you are, appealing characters, are those appealing characters? So I would say no, same rules still apply. Know the job, make sure your skills match the job, and make sure you put your best work forward. But I think as far as a recruiter, and know that a lot of recruiters, a lot of them actually do work already remotely. So for a lot of recruiters, this was the normal. They would work from their homes, or when you had a contract recruiter. I think what's different is for the hiring managers and people who are, when you have reviews, we used to have reviews in the studio and bring the work. But, for recruiters who were working remotely, nothing has changed.
Wow. So, Jay, I would love to get your perspective. Everyone is thinking about streaming. Disney has a new streaming platform. Everything is streaming, streaming, streaming. So how have streaming platforms impacted animation broadly? And Camille, you can jump in on this, and Christina, you can jump in on this if you have a perspective as well, and your area specifically.
Well, obviously from the very basic level that there is now a different platform to work for. Our typical platforms were Disney Channel, which is our 6 to 11 demo. You had Disney Junior, which is the 2 to 5 demo. Not as much original production going into Disney XD. That tends to be where you see our Lucas stuff and Marvel stuff and some acquisitions. But the streaming service obviously has opened up a different platform for us. And, the demo for that is really interesting because it's not a specific age group per se. It's sort of co-family viewing, which is the shortcut way of saying, hey, both the parents and the kids can sit down on the sofa and enjoy the material, right? And I know that sort of even from Christina's world, in terms of all of the divisions at Disney are having their opportunities to create projects for the streaming service. And that sort of is the connective tissue that we're sort of all working from. But, look, there's, like everything else, there's challenges. And from that standpoint is just like, where do we fit in in terms of, especially in terms of the development side, right? What works for a Disney Plus show and a Disney Channel show. Disney, the streaming service is not necessarily going to be interested in creating Disney Junior type shows, because why do they have to? It's gonna be porting to them eventually anyway, right? So their unique space in terms of the type of programs that they're looking for and the type of style shows they're looking for, both live action and animation, puts us in a position where either the IP that they're already familiar with, for example, Phineas and Ferb movie we did specifically for the streaming service. But when it comes to original IP, what is that sort of balance point or sweet spot where you're sort of creating content that works for both kids and adults? Not always easy, and not always easy. So that, from a very direct standpoint, that's how it impacts us. Obviously, just from the term, and Disney's not alone. I'm sure it's true with Viacom and true with others in terms of starting to look at streaming as the priority. Let's be honest. I mean, that to me is sort of gearing the way in terms of the future. And so when you have the challenges of something like COVID, where, especially in Disney's case, it's closed down the theaters. I mean, that's a good part of our revenue stream, just gone. Let's not even mention the parks and the cruise lines and all that stuff. So, so you have to look at it obviously from a business standpoint as well, in terms of sort of managing the how you place your content once the content's developed and once it's done. So while the short-term impact is like, it's still business as usual, I think the big question, which I don't know any of us can answer fully at this point, is, what does it look like a year from now? What does it look like 2 years from now in terms of the type of content we're developing and how that's being monetized and commercialized in the best way possible?
Thank you. Christina, do you want to hop in and share your perspective on this?
Yeah, I love streaming platforms. I'm actually super happy that there are so many and so many exist, especially just for our industry in general, because it's going to create jobs. Content for like streaming platforms has to be quick, it has to be fast, and they're constantly going to need new episodes, new series, because we live in an instant gratification world, and we sit on Netflix. I just saw last night that they have like a shuffle button. So it's like they could pick for you what to watch if
Yes.
you don't even know. So it's like it's endless. You could literally be on these streaming platforms forever. So it's like you don't realize how much of your day is actually, and like sometimes it's the best part of your day, going home, unwinding, and like for us, we make this stuff, but like for the common consumer, which I am as well, it's like this is something of someone's livelihood. So when you're making a streaming platform, you have to make it worth the while. You want people to constantly turn, you want them to check and see what new is on there. So I think that they're really powerful. And I think it's really interesting too, especially, because now that Disney Plus is out, when you're creating this like streaming platform for studios that aren't really, short based projects, like it creates like it takes 6 years almost to create a Pixar film. So now if you want to create, a shorter, version of something, you have to like realize that the people that have been working there for a very long time have to adjust as well. But I think it's great because, this also feeds into, having newer people come in, people who are ready to work, ready to be fast. A lot of people, especially, there's a big difference, I feel like, between feature film and film industry stuff and commercial and TV stuff. Because, the production timelines are very different. The size of these productions is so different. And I think to always have that like mindset, constantly evolving, constantly changing, I think it's really important now more than ever. Because like what we're doing right now, if it hasn't happened the last like couple years, is going to project what's going to happen the next 10 years for sure.
I love that. Yeah, good advice. Very solid advice. And so while we're on the topic of new opportunities, Camille, you touched on this a little bit earlier, the various roles that are available outside of being an animator. But there are a lot of people in this audience, not all of them draw. I'd love to know, what can people do? What could a young producer do? What could a young film and TV student do?
Yeah, and this is a really, again, it's such a unique time. And I think, the pandemic has been the great disruptor, but out of disruption comes opportunity. And I think that what has sprung from this is all of these resources that are now available to people from your own home. We always, we didn't always, because I'm one of those that did not have the internet, dating myself, but I didn't grow up with those resources. Now for people who are interested in finding out about the different careers in animation, the artistic side, the admin side, the technology side, your laptop, your phone, is right there for you. And there are a lot of organizations out there, just like this one actually, that is providing information for people to learn more about the other areas. And when you get that information, use your devices to find out more, like find out what like for example, if there's a particular studio that you are interested in, go to that studio, look up that studio, look at their job site, look at what jobs they have to offer, look at if they are part of a bigger company. Nickelodeon is part of Viacom has so many different other segments. BET, MTV, Comedy Central, Disney has Pixar and Lucas and animation and TV animation. So do your research, dig a little deeper, look at the jobs, look at the opportunities on the job sites. And The other thing is, you've got Facebook, you've got Instagram, you've got Twitter. Look up where people from those companies are going to be. Are they going to be speaking anywhere? Are they going to be, talking about different roles within um, their studio or what they do? There's so much online learning right now and networking. So look for organizations in the area that you're interested in. There's so many, nonprofit organizations. There's, like Women in Animation, there's Latinx in Animation, there's Rise Up Animation, there's Black and Animated. There's so many opportunities out there for you to be able to connect, ask questions, meet people, network. And that's how you're going to get to know a little bit more, and immerse yourself into the industry, do the research, learn the roles, and, ask the questions about what do I need to do to get to the next step? Who should I talk to? What other resources are out there for me to learn? And again, there's so much at your fingertips just from your laptop, your phone, your tablet. It's pretty cool. I mean, it's amazing that, and the other thing to remember is people in animation in this industry, they love to talk. Like we have some people that love to talk and they love to share and they love to, so don't be afraid to ask questions. You have to ask in order to get what you want. So ask.
That seems to be a theme tonight, right? That there's a certain level of proactiveness that is essential. Even with opportunities abound, you really have to put yourself forward, do the research, meet people, get the information, and then go for it. Fantastic.
Especially now because we can't meet in person, take advantage of all this opportunity that's at your fingertips, literally.
Yeah, yeah. You mentioned several organizations focused on animation that are for Black and Brown creators. We're in a time where there's a heightened awareness of a need for more inclusion, more voices, more different kinds of people at the table. I'd love to know from each of you, and I'll start with Christina, what are you excited about with this new movement and this new interest in DE&I?
Oh yeah, I love this so much because when I started in animation, when I tell you I walked into a room and felt like I did not belong, I mean like I walked into a room and just felt very out of place. I was, bullied in college, I have a very loud personality, I like makeup and I really didn't see a lot of people like me in the room. But as time went on, I did find organizations and I'm so happy because like now I work with them. So I'm very adamant in women in animation. I absolutely love them. As I was at Pixar, I was very, very fortunate enough to meet a very beautiful young lady, Taylor Shaw. She created Black Women Animate.
Yes, yes.
And I love Taylor. I love Taylor. So it was so funny how we got put in touch together. But I remember it was right when she just started. It was right before her first event at Cartoon Network. And I was like, I will be there. You don't have to ask me twice. I even got my roommate who also works with me at Pixar, and we flew down to Burbank and I got the Pixar team in touch with Taylor because I wanted them to sponsor her. So sometimes it takes one person, but you have to realize that you're in this together. You want diversity, you want inclusion. You don't want the same stories being told every single time you watch a film, but just, with a different hairdo. Like, you don't want that. You want cultural stories. You want when someone sits down at the TV or goes into a movie theater and they see themselves. Because when they see themselves, it's going to spark something in them and they're going to want to be a part of the community. They're going to be like, oh my goodness, whoever told that story, I hope I can go in a room and tell my story. Because that's what you want. You want people to use their voice. You want people to be able to walk into these events created. Black Women Animates, amazing. Oh my goodness, that was like one of my favorite days in my career ever. Just like seeing how many people showed up from all over, like people were driving in from different states, like it was incredible. And like even like Women Animates events, women in animation events, like they're incredible and they always have been. It's really just turned into something really beautiful. And there's so many different sectors of it too. Like sometimes like I'll get a call from Women Animation in New York and like Women Animation, in all these different cities. And I'm really, really proud of the direction because now everyone's using their voice and everyone's being heard, and that's the most important thing. And if you can't like do something yourself, you have to create a team, because everything takes a team. It takes an army, and it's really, really important to remember that you're not alone. Even when you think you're alone, there's always one person at a studio, at a place that shares the common thing that you want to achieve, and they're going to want to achieve it with you. It might take a while to find your people, but the people are out there. Luckily, there's these amazing groups where you can find them faster, but you never give up. Use exactly what's at your face. Camille said it perfectly. There's so much to look up. There's like things like this where you could sit at home, just turn on your laptop, and then, you know, you get to learn so much. So it really is beautiful. There's so many amazing, you know, organizations now, and I'm really just so proud. And I really, really do love, you know, the diversity that's happening now, because it's been long overdue and we deserve it now more than ever.
Nice,
Yeah.
nice. Jay, I know this is a big part of your work, so I'd love for you to jump in and tell me what you're excited about.
Sure. Well, obviously, if for anyone who has D&I in their title, their job has dramatically changed over the past 5 months, as you might imagine. So, you know, there have been some sort of real world things that, you know, people have had to deal with. I think the reality and sort of following up and piggybacking off of what Christina said, you know, specific to, you know, when you try to find some silver linings in this 2020, you know, they're hard. It's hard, but if you search hard enough, you can find some things. And I'm going to use the Black Women Animate as a specific example to that. You know, so much of the animation industry is based in LA, you know, and I think that, you know, again, small silver lining here, but the Lightbox events, Black Women Animate, CTN coming up this year, all of a sudden it's to a certain degree a great equalizer, because now if everything's virtual, then that means you in New Jersey don't have to hop on a plane and find a hotel and try to figure out how to manage finances just to get to some of these events. Now you have these events in essence coming to you. So I think, you know, as I try to keep a positive spin and this positive outlook on all that we do, you know, you take those small things. You know, obviously from the standpoint of the combination of the pandemic with the social unrest, you know, a lot of us, you know, whatever our priorities were prior to May 25th have sort of changed somewhat dramatically. And so oftentimes the work now comes more on an internal basis, you know, sort of being a leader within the company, because the lid that came off of this impacted so many people in so many different ways. And I think for us in the animation industry, you know, these organizations were always there, you know, and now they're getting a little bit more of the attention that they deserve. You know, women in animation has always been just a blessing. And when students reach out to me, I say, well, while you're on your job search, while you're uploading portfolios and whatnot, hook up with women in animation. Even during this time, it's just like the workshops and panels, and the amount of people represented in women in animation who are from the different studios. All of a sudden, you can be making friends in the industry and connecting yourself to the community before you even get that first job. And, you know, truth be told, a little bit secret, hey, you know what? Not every job's posted. So having a friend, having certain friends at different studios who say, hey, by the way, this might be opening up soon. I want you to reach out to my friend so-and-so. It happens. And so make it a point to understand that if this is a community you want to be in, again, it's really hard to get into Disney and Nickelodeon. It's really hard to get into Pixar. It's really hard to get into these places. That's okay. Keep at it, you know, reach out for that dream. But meanwhile, make sure that you know who's in your community. And, you know, you just sort of reference some, you know, women in animation, Black in animate, Latinx in animation. There are a whole lot of different groups that are focused in on underrepresented talent on a whole host of levels. And what's been amazing during this time, it's it's even more intriguing about those folks who have stepped up during this time. Bobby Pontius and his Rise Up animation group, just amazing. That just sort of got born out of this movement. We had a writers one, if you raised a percentage, that was created by and co-founded by one of our writers on Proud Family. These are things that are just coming up because again, this goes back to what I said in my original presentation about the people in this industry. So well-meaning, so collaborative, so ready to help and reach out. And I can't remember who was saying it, but I have a theory about sort of connecting up with people in the industry now. The very fact that we're all working from home, there's that sense of, hey, my boss is not looking over my shoulder. Human nature is such that let me just sky a little bit on social media while I'm doing my work, because you don't have that same vibe. And all of us were looking for some sort of connectivity in one way or another. We were so isolated. We were so just sort of, so it makes sense to me that, and I use LinkedIn a lot. That's my social media of choice. But, oftentimes people are reaching out to me on LinkedIn just to say, hey, can I get a moment of your time? I just want some advice. And my theory behind this is like, typically now people who wouldn't necessarily be on LinkedIn at this point of the day, are there. And if they're looking for connections, just like, you know what, let me talk to this person. So, be humble, be mindful that you're coming into their space. But I'd venture to say you would get a lot more connections now in just sort of doing that. And look, what's the worst that can happen? You don't hear from somebody or they say no. More often than you don't hear from somebody. I'm telling you, like from, I always say, much to the chagrin of my assistant, I'm taking 15 to 20 meet and greets a week, along with everything else I do, just because I can't say no to anybody on LinkedIn. So
you are very generous with your time.
So, and so there's just one of those things where, you have to look at it from a different perspective. But I guess my advice is make sure you're connecting with this industry that you want to be in, because I think there's now, again, Black women animate. Now it's just a matter of, the purchase price of the ticket. You don't have to get the hotel and you don't have to fly there. And is it the same? No. I think there is missing that sort of spontaneity to some of the meet and bump-ins. But you know what? This is beneficial. This gets you to know people. And, we know Taylor very well. We just finished doing our pre-records for the event this year. So we sort of set that all up. Black and Animated, these folks were just a virtual group. We brought them to one of our first networking and social mixers. We were the ones who introduced themselves to each other. A lot of those folks hadn't met each other personally because it was a Facebook group. We brought them into our studio and it was fantastic. And you could just see the love and the warmth that went into, like, that many Black people in the animation industry? Who knew? Like, you could take that snapshot. So I think it's really important that even from visiting like the animationmagazine.net and the Cartoon Brews, just to know who's doing what in the industry is really important and really powerful. But get involved, get connected, like reach out to folks and get to know some people.
Excellent. And before we go to audience questions, Camille, I'll let you jump in if you want to share anything that you're excited about now in terms of diversity and inclusion.
Yeah, for me, much like Christina, I was usually always the only one in the room. And, pretty much my whole career. And I, before D&I was a thing, I just found myself like, where are the other people of color? Where are the women? Where are the non-binary people? Like, and so when I started recruiting, I started recruiting back in 2005, you couldn't even talk about, any of this. You couldn't have that conversation. Before I joined Nickelodeon, I was at Disney Feature Animation, and, we started a task force there. That was over 5 years ago. And it was just shocking to me to be able to have that conversation with the heads of the studio, because you couldn't talk about being the only Black woman in the room. You couldn't talk about the lack of the other people of color in the room. So it was like this moment that things were shifting. And then, to Jay's point, in May of this year, with the murder of George Floyd, it was just like the lid came off the pot, and it's like, we can talk about this, we can move this work forward, we can, we can really talk openly and, across not just this industry, but, it's out. So my advice is, seek people out. Again, you'll realize like these connections. Like, I know Jay from working at Disney, and I know Christina because we did, it was a conference, and we went to visit folks from SVA. We're all connected. I've worked with Taylor in Black Women Animate. I mean, we are all connected in this, and everybody's goal is to, find people and get people in, and opportunities. Again, just like this center having these talks, like this is another moment, and this is something like you should definitely take advantage of. So take advantage of those moments, take advantage of those groups. You make yourself seen, even if it's virtually. We remember you. And just make the circuit. If you're an introvert, send an email. If you're an extrovert, say hi. There's a space for everybody. And when you get to that next level, you reach back and you bring somebody else in with you.
Yes. Yes. I love that. I love that. On that note, we are going to take our first question from the audience.
I had a question about if it's possible to get a job in animation despite not having internship experience.
Hi, Justin. Yes, it is possible to get a job in animation without having an internship. Internships help, but it's not the be all end all if you don't get an internship. An internship is good because it can get you into a studio environment or the working environment. When I was working at Disney Feature, there were animators who had taught themselves how to animate, and they're working on films like Moana and Frozen 2. So there are lots of things online right now that you can work on. If animation is your bag, then focus on your animation. Make sure that your reel is up to par. Again, I go back to what I said earlier. If you're applying for jobs, look at what they're asking for. Whether it's video games, TV, features, if they're asking for a certain type of animation, make sure that you have that reflected in your work. If you don't have the money to go through an online school, or depending on what you're studying, there's so many online tutorials, and they even have rigs that you can download online for free. So you just keep working on those animation tests, keep working on your portfolio, study what the company that you're looking to get into is looking for, whether if it's a character animation, creature animation, and make sure you put your best work and that work first on your reel. And that goes for any discipline, regardless of, whether it's animation, effects, lighting, rigging, whatever you're interested in. Just focus on making sure that your work is the best and it's tailored.
Hi, I'm from New York University. My name's Journey. I want to say thank you so much for coming, and wanted to let you know I'm here on behalf of myself and my friend who's stuck in classes. I just wanted to know, she wants to be a production coordinator for animation and a screenwriter, and my career focuses voiceover for animation. And we both just really wanted to know if it's possible to have a successful career in the animation industry while based in New York City, or if we should eventually make the career decision to relocate to Los Angeles.
A couple of things. First of all, there's always exception to rules, right? So let's be honest about that. But this is my opinion. The animation industry is based in LA. There's no getting around that. Now, it doesn't mean that there aren't places. Christina being up in, in Pixar land is, can support that. I think the reality is, ultimately, I always go from the standpoint of you have to go where the jobs are. Now, we can put the asterisk next to the pandemic right now, because this is right now as we speak, as we're sort of referencing hiring and what have you, there's no studio to go to at this point. So there is a sort of different scenario right now. But specifically to, like, I think I heard you reference as production coordinator, and I think you mentioned screenwriter in there. Voiceover, I'm not as clear on that, just in terms of, that isn't necessarily my skill set, but specific to the production coordinator in normal times, you absolutely have to be at the studio in order to, to do that job. You don't have to be there specifically as a writer necessarily, but, and it was one of the things I sort of wanted to follow up on when we were talking about the pandemic and the sort of idea of working remotely. We've managed and we've done a great job in the animation industry. And, I think we're also very blessed that we could still keep working during this time. At the same time, if you ask me, it isn't an ideal situation. It doesn't come without hiccups, and it doesn't come without compromises that you have to make. One of them being that, some of the best sequences, the funniest sequences that I've seen in a TV show or in a script come from artists and writers who are sitting over lunch, having burritos and sort of talking about that. Some of the intangibles that go into that crew chemistry and, that crew collaboration is definitely adds to the quality of a show. And I think that, while we have been physically able to do this work and, we've done a lot of good work, I think if you talk to creators and they say, well, let me compare the pre-pandemic episodes we did to my pandemic episodes, and they can sort of point to areas like, yeah, I don't want to do this again. The audience may not see that, but, they see it. And it's that sort of passion that we embrace. I guess the easiest way for me to say that is that it's not impossible to work remotely in the world we're in right now. But ultimately, from an entry level standpoint and from just the way our studio functions, we want to have writers' rooms together. We want our writers all in the same room, because it helps with the crew chemistry and the collaboration of the show. From a production coordinator standpoint, yeah, I mean, if we're a working, functioning studio and people are in that process, pretty much you have to be there. There are certain learnings that we have now where we know that, do we all have to be in 5 days a week, 10 hours a day to do this job? No, I think there can be some managing of that. But I think the reality in our business is, especially when you're talking about entry-level positions, you sort of have to be where these jobs are. I think New York used to have a really robust and flourishing animation industry. And when back in the day, when asked that question, it's just like, New York, LA, Vancouver, do where you want to be. But I think, just from my perspective, I don't think it's impossible to work in the animation industry while not being in LA. But I think you limit your opportunities without being in LA, would be my sense to answer that question.
Thank you so much for taking the time to answer all of our questions. My name is Brooke and I attend Occidental College. My question is, can animation interns be beginners? So in other words, is there like a training during an animation internship in case there's something we don't know how to do yet?
Christina, do you want to share your experience? Because I know you started out with an internship and then.
Hi, Brooke. Love your question. That's definitely a really good question. For internships regarding animation, usually they're not so like classroom based. But if you're coming in with prior knowledge, I always say the most learning you're going to do is on your first job, on any job. Like, you're going to learn the most once you're in a studio. Like, you can go to school no matter how long, but once you're in a job, you're learning more than ever. So luckily there are some internships though that are classroom learning based, and studios do bring in some people. There is a Pixar Animation Studios internship for college students that are not seniors. And it is a learning based program where you come in for 10 weeks and they bring you through every part of the pipeline. So let's say you're very skilled in modeling or set dressing or shading. They will teach you the lighting 1 week and, you know, effects and animation other weeks. So that is an actual program that they know that people are coming in to learn. You're not working on production while being there. So you're just classroom based. You go in, you're sitting in a room with about 10 people, and you guys are all learning together what it takes to create a film from start to finish.
Thank you guys so much for doing this. I'm somebody who's been more like into 3D animation, 3D design, and I feel like it's always a little bit like unclear since there's so many like technical areas or artistic areas for what to do. So I was wondering if for a 3D, like for a 3D application or portfolio, what should we focus on for that? Should we focus more job oriented, or would it be better to show like a wide range of like lighting capabilities or modeling capabilities?
That's a great question, Camille.
Hi, Dylan. It is a really great question, and I'm so glad you asked it because I can speak to you from a recruiter point of view and a hiring manager point of view. Depending on what you're going for, so if you're when you say 3D, that can mean so many different things. Like you brought out a couple. It could be a lighter, right? It could be a modeler. It could be an animator. It could be a rigger. Make sure that you you specify what role in CG that you're looking for. So don't put on your resume or, you know, CG artist if what you really want to do is be a modeler. But if you want to do multiple skills, like if you do want to be more of a generalist, you can put CG generalist, but then on your sometimes what I recommend to people is create a website so that you can highlight each one of the areas of CG that you are interested in. So we can get a better idea of your skill set. So if you do all of those different disciplines, organize your website so that we can see your animation, we can see your modeling, we can see your lighting, or whatever disciplines that you do. But if you're applying for an animator position and you're a modeler, we're probably not going to look at your work. But if you can call out what discipline that you're really interested in, that really helps us. And you have to tell us what you want to do, you know, because we're all on your side. We want to get you hired, but you have to help us. You have to be really, really purposeful with your application, and you have to really hone in and tell us. If you are a generalist, that's totally fine. If you're applying to a studio or a company that has people in generalist roles. If you're working at companies like, you know, some of the like Disney or Sony or even some roles at Nickelodeon, we're going to say, you know, for this job, we are looking for lighting compositing artists. So you have to put all your lighting compositing work on your reel, or at least we have to be able to get to it very easily. And you have to tell us about your lighting and compositing experience. So I hope that makes sense.
Hi, everybody. My name is Ben. I'm from Southern Connecticut State University. As somebody who is interested more in the voice acting aspect of animation, what would you recommend building a portfolio and starting a demo reel for voice acting?
I think I'm going to throw that back to you, Camille.
Hi, Ben. How are you?
Good, thanks.
So voice acting, we get a lot of questions about voice acting. You know, a lot, it's that one is going to be really, really dependent on, again, I throw it back to the studios. You know, some places will only deal with you if you have an agent. So, you know, I had a sit down with someone who worked in our casting department at one time, and I was like, really, tell me what it is that you look for. And they, you know, they did say, like, primarily we work with agents, but there is a way to get into voice acting if you're interested, which is to try to find a way to start doing scratch recordings. Sometimes a lot of studios will work with scratch actors, because they, you know, they'll fill in the temporary recording before they cast the actors. And that's a really good way to try to get in. But even to do that, you need to, you know, look up there are online organizations that can help with, you know, who's hiring Scratch. So that is one possibility, but you really should try to find out, you know, who's in the casting department, or sometimes again, it depends, like sometimes it's in the development areas, but who's doing casting, which agencies they might be working with, you know, put together a voice demo reel, and then try to submit those to the agents, or look for those companies that the casting agents look for that do Scratch. And then, you know, sometimes when they do bring in people to do Scratch, sometimes they really like the voice. They may not be cast as the lead, but sometimes you'll get work in the background, or, you know, and again, it's really going to depend on the studio. And it is, I'm not going to lie, it's a hard industry to break into, but it isn't impossible.
Right.
And with all this content coming, they're going to need more voices. So, you know, just don't give up. And, you know, again, it's one of those things, like you have to do your research, and you have to really, you know, if this door is closed, you know, try the window, try another way, you know, be resourceful about finding out the information, but it is there if you dig a little deep.
Great. Thank you so much.
Hey, Ro, can I check in on that real fast too? There are businesses geared to supporting that industry. One of them, which is sort of the voiceover workshops. We get into that situation where it's like, you know, should I put together a demo reel? It's just like, I wouldn't even know how to put together a demo reel, but I would tell you, like, you go to a workshop for people who have worked in that industry, who are teaching and training you in terms of how to voice act and how to prep a demo reel. And also sort of focusing on the connectivity of our industry. You know, a lot of those folks who are teaching the workshops are actually still working in the industry and have their own connections. So that's another way to look at it. And I'd venture to say, again, there must be a lot of online versions of this now, just given the circumstances. So you may want to check in on that as well.
Hi, my name's Anna. I attend Stony Brook University. I had a question about like ideas. Like, I come up with a lot of great like story ideas, character ideas, and like I want to share my artwork for people to see and to like hopefully get found out by a company. But I'm worried about people like stealing my ideas. And on top of that, like, where do you think is best to share your work? Whether through a website, social media, what do you think is best?
I'm going to say Jay.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to be honest with you. This question came up. I was at just another panel before. It came up about the idea of stealing. And I got to be honest with you, that is not really an issue that we have had throughout the industry. This is just my perspective. I mean, ultimately, you got to share your stuff if you want people to see it and make decisions on it. And yeah, you know, to a certain degree, anything you put out there at some point, there's that risk. But I really don't sort of see that is really all that much of an issue, at least in the circles that I travel. Does it happen every now and then? Sure, but not to the degree that there should be a sort of, in my opinion, fundamental concern of, oh my goodness, I don't want to put it on a website, or I want it because for fear of someone stealing it. I just, you know, from the standpoint of folks who are trying to get in this industry and are trying to make their way, there's only one way to do it. And, and as far as, you know, sort of whether it's dealing with, you know, going to a Camille for a recruiter, or self-promoting yourself, getting yourself out there, you will know the amount of people that our crews have found based on Twitter, based on YouTube, just because the stuff is out there. It's a new way of looking for talent. And so, again, I'm not going to sit here and say it never happens, but I don't think you should be expending too much energy worried about that, because I think the reality is, like, everybody's out there trying to sort of showcase their stuff. And if your stuff is great, ultimately, you'll find your spot, and if you're worried about it from the standpoint of pitching ideas and episodes, well, truth be told, a place like Disney, and I'm sure it's probably true at Nickelodeon as well, it's just like getting a job as a crew member and pitching a show idea are two different, very different roads to travel. And if our development department was taking pitches from everybody who ever wanted to pitch an idea, they wouldn't have time enough to do their job. So, going back to that idea about when Camille was sort of referencing in voiceover work, you typically need an agent. The same is true for pitching a shows or getting somebody in development to see your stuff. I mean, unless you have at least at the Disneys and the big studios, if you don't have any sort of prior experience or a track record, then that's going to be hard to sort of do that pitch. But I will tell you this, if one of our crew members or one of our development executives finds your stuff through a Twitter or on a website and reaches out to you, that's a different conversation. And they're coming to you and they've looked at your stuff and said, okay, this is somebody, this idea is great. We want to take a look at this. And that's a different conversation when someone's coming to you than you coming to them. So I would just keep that in mind as you're sort of thinking about that process.
Hey, how's it going? I'm a digital content creator at a sketch comedy channel. So I do a lot of film and video, and I was always taught film and video and how to write for video. But I was just wondering what the biggest differences were between writing a pilot or just a screenplay in general for live action or animation.
It's sort of what I touched on at the beginning, from the standpoint of looking for writers who can write for us, I don't really sort of separate out live action or animation because, again, I am looking for your character treatment. I'm looking for the way you handle the focus on the character, because that, in essence, is what we're looking for in our space. I think that if you can create a compelling character that is not for our 6 to 11 audience, but for an older audience, I'm compartmentalizing that. I can sort of say, you know what, everything that I would look for in this character development is what I look for when I'm searching for writers to write for animation. So, if you're writing a story about a 32-year-old hipster beatnik who's just lost his job and now is trying to reconnect with his youth to find out where it all went wrong in life and what's the journey getting back to what I want, and I'm compelled and following this character and rooting for this character, then my thought is like, wow, this person probably can write for DuckTales as well, because the character is what's driving what we look for in our staff writers and also in our pitches as well. I mean, that's sort of the connective tissue that we look for. So, ultimately, if and when you got that job as a staff writer on a animated series, yeah, you have to adjust a little bit of add more visualization to your scripts. Not that we're asking a writer to, storyboard and create the look of a show, but you want to make sure that you're not wall-to-wall dialogue. You want to make sure that there are sequences in your script that sort of showcase a more of a visual sort of point of view than just dialogue after dialogue after dialogue. So you're gonna have to make adjustments. The jokes that you have in your script have to be relatable to the 6 to 11 audience. So you're gonna have to make adjustments from that. But it's like I said at the beginning, character depth, dimensionality, character development, I think is the hardest part of script writing. So if you get that on it with a live action pilot, which again is mostly what I get, and it means we're mostly hiring from live action samples, then that to me is the heavy lifting. And so I don't really sort of look at it from the standpoint of, oh, this is animation ready. Oftentimes the animation samples I get don't feel like it's the best people's work because they're assuming that that's what I want to see. And I'm looking for your best work. I guess that's the best answer I have for that.
Hello, I'm Julia. I go to Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute. First of all, I just really want to thank you all for sharing your expertise and wisdom with us today. And I want to ask, I'm really interested in 2D environment and background art. And I was wondering like what kind of skill sets or jobs are applicable for that kind of thing.
Okay, so now I'm actually going to defer to you ladies because I don't know if Christina or Camille is the best person to answer this. Christina?
I think Camille might be better at
Okay,
answering
great.
this, but I will say because I am an environment artist, I work with the art team literally all the time. So I'm constantly, at Pixar, I'm making the sets. So I set model, I set dress, and I create the vegetation for the films. So I'm working with the 2D artists, and I see what portfolios get them in, and I see what it really takes. So I would recommend if you have a studio in mind, this is like my all-time advice. If you have a studio in mind that you love, let's say you really love Pixar, let's say you love Blizzard, the video game studio or anything, I would go on LinkedIn and see maybe who has gotten the job previously, who is a concept artist there, who is a 2D animator there, or who is working there currently and designing for the environments, because you will find them. And I would see what their portfolios contained, or maybe look at even other schools and look at people who are doing the same major as you. There's a lot of like, when you go on a school's website, you could see like the different breakdowns of majors. You could see what kind of work they're producing, and seeing maybe where some people, if you really like their portfolio, be like, where did they end up? Are they still in school? And you could reach out and you could build a network. But I think when it comes to environment portfolios, especially for 2D art, um, they want to see the bigger picture, but they also want to see if we needed to pinpoint something that was going to become ultimately a hero prop, which, does happen on shows and films, how well you could bring that to its like, 150% rather than something that might be in the background and can stay at a 25% range of quality. So I think that's really important. And I think also, have fun with it. Have fun with it. A lot of stuff with 2D artwork, especially, they like to see sketch work because not everything is going to be that final beautiful finished image of like an entire city block or a candy store or a person's room in a story. It's going to be sometimes where you're sitting in the room with the story team and you're going to have to sketch and as you're watching the film or the show that you're working on and come up with ideas in the room. And sometimes a little sketch turns into like you take one thing from here, one thing from there. And I think another really big key, especially because I have a lot of friends that work in 2D, is that I always realize the best 2D artists are always looking at real life reference. That's really, really, really important. You always want to constantly reference something from real life because, if we all sat together in a room and we're like, let's draw, a bookshelf, we're all going to draw that bookshelf differently. So it's always really nice to see where that 2D artist, especially in a big environment drawing, to see like that image exactly of maybe where they got that inspiration from. So I think that's also like really important. Those are some tips that I have. I'm very close with a lot of 2D artists because they end up becoming my best friends after the show because I'm working with them so closely. But I hope that helps. I know Camille probably has a lot more experience in this though.
I think absolutely spot on. I mean, I think you great advice from Christina, because you have to realize when you want to go into 2D, you're creating artwork that's going to be used in the show, and it's going to be taken by that next team or department down the pipeline. So you have to be able to create art that's not for yourself. You're taking somebody else's vision and creating it. And some of the roles for 2D artists are background designer, color stylist, background painter, prop designer, character designer. And, I think there was the person before who said the CG roles or 3D roles, when you get ready, do the research on what the different 2D roles are, because there's visual development, which could be characters or environments. There's some people who specialize in the character side, some people who do environments, which includes props and buildings and worlds, and some people who do both. So you should really look at, like, do you lean more toward the character? Do you do more environment? Do you like both? It's okay. But again, just be able to highlight your character work, your environment work, if you like props, and life still reference drawings are amazing. We like to be able to see that you understand composition, anatomy, storytelling in your sketches. When we look at portfolios, a lot of times we'll look at the work, but we'll go back and look at sketches to see, if you understand line, and if you understand shape language and composition. So that's also important. And when you put your portfolio together, one of the biggest mistakes that I see people on the design side do is they'll throw like everything out there without any structure or thought to storytelling and how they put together their portfolio. So it's really important to show us your process, show us your thinking, show your aesthetic. If you're applying to a company, don't copy what we do, show us your spin on what we do, so we can be like, oh, I can see that person on the show. You may not be in the room to be able to explain your portfolio to us, so you have to be able to lay it out so that we get your story. I hope that makes sense. But research the other disciplines. Like Christina said, look up some of the artists that you like. Because a lot of people have their portfolios online, and Instagram is fantastic. I guess people aren't using Tumblr so much anymore, but I still look sometimes. But we look on those platforms, but look at the people who you admire and look who they're following. ArtStation is another really great place to go and check out portfolio examples. And you can look to your heart's content. So, check out some of the different designers out there. And again, please, please, please remember to tailor your work to the studio. Don't submit a portfolio that's full of photoreal, like visual effects or game design, to an animated, a TV animation studio or a feature animation studio, unless they're looking for projects with that type of art.
Great advice. Great advice. We have come to the end of the evening. I just want to thank you so much for your time. I learned so much from all of you. I'm sure the students learned a ton. It was very generous of you to come and speak with us and just share your insights and your knowledge. So thank you, Camille. Thank you, Christina. Thank you, Jay. Have a wonderful rest of your evening.